We're back with Joey Powell to discuss how he founded his own company to publish his work and the works of others. So, Joey, thank you for sticking around with us.
Thank you. Wasn't planning on going anywhere.
We talked in the last segment about what you were figuring out when it came to publishing. You were trying to educate yourself on traditional publishing. When you were sending out to publishers, what sort of things did they ask from you when you submitted?
So there's kind of two buckets. You have publishers who accept unagented submissions, and then you have agents that work for agencies that will represent you, and you can submit to them. The most common request when you're submitting a manuscript, we want to see some kind of page count or the first 3 chapters. So let's say the first 10 pages, sometimes they will ask for a full synopsis, meaning I'm just spoiling the entire story. Like, I'm going to tell you what happens from beginning to end because I want to know if it's worth their time, right? The first 10 pages are going to let them know, hey, can this person write? And also, is this book engaging enough where I want to see where it goes? And then the synopsis is going to tell them, yes, this author has some follow through and people are going to find this to be a really compelling story. Some of the less typical things that I've seen, but they're definitely out there, is publishers asking, especially small publishers that don't have huge marketing budgets, they will ask you to provide a marketing plan for your book, which they don't really provide much in the way of guidelines as to how to put that together. So if you're not, a PR or marketing whiz, you may not really put something together that they think is acceptable, which is, again, very odd since they don't have guidelines for it. But the other thing that I've seen is they want you to submit things like, tell us what kind of works you've published in the past, and tell us the sales figures of those books. And also, we want all of your social media handles, because something that people don't really realize unless they're told or unless they're actually within the industry, is that social media following and your perceived popularity has a lot to do with whether you actually sell a manuscript. And of course, there are those stories about people who are kind of plucked from obscurity and they don't have a huge social media presence, but the writing is so strong that, they get to that next stage and they get something published. But especially for the smaller presses who it's so important that they sell copies, just because there isn't a lot of sales that really they can get from novels because of the exposure, versus a traditional publisher who maybe has like a booth set up at Barnes & Noble with 50 copies on the table that you can just pluck right out. So yeah, those are the things that a lot of publishers ask for.
So along the way, you're learning all these things, and I think a lot of people, and maybe people watching today who might want to publish, they have a dream of publishing a book. It seems like this kind of insurmountable task, but all these things you're learning along the way, you're realizing how much of it you can do yourself. Mm-hmm. You decided to start your own company, so tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I should say I by no means am, I'm not the resource that you should look to for this kind of stuff, because I've started pretty recently doing this, but I found throughout the process of trying to make my book a book that I really enjoyed the aspects of cover design, of interior design and formatting, and of distribution. So I got really acquainted with what different distributors could do for the book, what types of distributors would be accepted by brick and mortar bookstores. And throughout that whole process, I was like, okay, if it was always my goal, because I'm a lover of storytelling. I want to tell my own stories, but I also want to publish other people's stories too. I'm like, if I had a good enough experience doing this with my own book, I might as well do it with other people's work as well, because as someone who is an advocate for independent creatives, independent filmmaking, independent publishing, I wanted to be able to do that for other people. So that's why I formed my publishing company.
Great, and you also talked about social media, how publishers will look at your social media presence, how many followers you have. For people who might not be social media savvy or might just not like social media, and a lot of authors, they kind of, seems like maybe they want to be more behind the scenes really. What did you learn along the way of community building as a writer through this whole process?
So you know this about me. I've never been much of a fan of social media. Once I started getting a lot more active in social media, I found it to be a really good tool for not gaining a following, because I don't like that phrase, but making connections, right? I figured out a way to do it where I felt like it was fun and not work. So I now run 3 social media accounts, which is kind of weird, but I try to space out my posts in a way that doesn't get overwhelming. So what I like to do with my social media account, yes, I do some promotion of my own work, but I like promoting other people's work. So I'll read books, I'll review them, I'll tag authors, and then for my podcast, I have an account where I post clips from my interviews with authors. And then on my publisher account, which it's not super active, but I post things like updates on submission windows. So right now we have a submission window open for short stories, and we also are going to open up submissions for novellas starting March 1st. So I use that as a way for to inform people of things that are occurring there.
Oh, very cool. And you also started a podcast.
I did.
All right. Yeah, you hit on that a little bit. Yeah, so let's talk about it. How was this podcast born, and why was it born?
So I told you earlier, I didn't have much of a community of writers when I started doing this, and shamelessly, I just wanted to make some writing friends, and I figured I like interviewing people. I find it very fun. It's something that I used to do in college when I worked for a film festival. I would interview filmmakers. And I said, what better way to form connections with people than to offer this platform where they could come on and just talk about their work, And I decided, I called it Creatives Getting Coffee because, well, one, I see it as virtual coffee chats. I'm always drinking coffee as I do it. But I wanted to share some time with creatives, not necessarily just genre authors. I've had a poet on. I'm going to have a bookseller on pretty soon as well, and another publisher on pretty soon. But I started that as a way, because a lot of these small press and independently published authors, because they don't have large marketing budgets and they don't get that much exposure, I wanted to create a platform where they could just talk for 30 minutes about their work, maybe share some insights into their creativity, their writing process, talk about the genre that they write in, and people seem to enjoy it quite a bit. So I'm really happy with how it's going.
If people want to know more info about either your publishing company, your podcast, could you just drop us a few things to look out for and where to find you?
Yeah, so my publisher site is madaxmedia.com. Pretty easy to remember. That's Axe with an E at the end, like the body spray. My Instagram account is at WowCoolJoeyWrites. My podcast account is at Creatives Getting Coffee Pod. And my publisher Instagram account is at madaxmedia.
And where can people find the podcast? Just anywhere you get podcasts?
Yeah, it's up on Apple Podcasts. I believe it's on Stitcher and Spotify, but also there's video content versions of them too on YouTube. So yeah, whether you want to watch it or listen to it, it's out there.
Very cool. All right. Well, hey, thank you for joining us. Very much appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, stick around because we'll be right back with one more local author.